The Industries and Inventions is a subject of great interest, as dating back 186 years, we find the Shakers to be an exceedingly ingenious people, devoted pioneers of this adventure. It is rather difficult for one who has been a member of this church to speak of the achievements of this especial group without seeming boastful. Yet, we, the inheritors, can justly be proud of the useful contributions made in early days. It therefore is our duty to inform those interested while we are able. While different societies originated and manufactured some particular item, these were shared with all others, as while we were like one big family, each society was a complete unit within themselves, self-sustaining, supplying the necessities for their own needs. An interchange of goods from one village to another was possible because of frequent visits of the leaders. I will now try to detail for you some of the early industries and inventions. Perhaps the most colorful of the early industries was the medicinal herb and root industry. This was a natural outgrowth of the Shakers' interest in gardening and agriculture. Eldris Anna White states in her writings that the Shakers were the first in this country to introduce botanical medical practice. The first roots, herbs, and vegetable extracts for medicinal purposes placed on the market, having borne the Shaker stamp. Thomas Cobbett of Canterbury originated the famous syrup of sarsaparilla, also the wild cherry pectoral syrup. Rose water was far famed, used in cooking as well as medicinally. I would not have time to give a complete list of the many herbs and roots grown, harvested, and packaged, but will quote a few figures to show the tremendous extent of this industry. Records show this industry started in 1800, reaching its greatest importance around 1848, when the sisters cleaned and packaged 9,327 pounds of roots. In 1871, 14,079 bottles of Norwood's tincture of auratum alone was put up. Perhaps the extent of this business may be gauged by the fact that in 1 year, more than 1 million labels were cut. How many of you ever heard of Heloline, a hand or aftershave lotion made from quinces at Mount Lebanon? The herb industry rapidly extended to Watervliet, Harvard, Sabbath Day Lake, Canterbury, Enfield, and Union Village. It is but a step from the herb industry to the garden seed industry, which flourished from the establishment of this business in 1794 to the early 1890s. In its early stages, plain paper and cloth bags were used. Later, brightly colored posters were distributed, and the seeds put up in neatly labeled boxes or in gay tinted little packages. One of the first industries was the making of men's wool hats. Another prosperous industry was the tanning of leather. It grew to such dimensions the Shakers were not able to raise enough hides themselves, so bought from nearby farmers. The manufacture of cloth and leather shoes were for their own use mainly. Leather mittens, bridles, saddles, and harnesses were also made. Such industries as making whips and whiplashes, dry measures, brass, bone, ivory, and pewter buttons, shoe buckles, garden hose, and ironware were necessary items for home use. Shingle, brick-making, and stone-cutting were active industries, filling orders for the world's market long before they used these items themselves. Countless items as apple barrels, wash and dye tubs, churns, and seed pails were manufactured. Wooden dippers in nests of 3, sieves of many types were made of wire, horses' manes, and cows' tails woven on special looms. Having a natural deposit of red clay at Mount Lebanon, pipes were made for sale. A small industry was the manufacture of steel, brass, and silver pens with handles of wood and tin made to close telescopically. The Shakers were credited with being the originator of the metal pen. An important industry was the making of oak staves for molasses hogsheads, which were exported to the West Indies. Beekeeping was an essential experiment, as the immense orchards of fruit trees were thusly benefited. Markets as far as England were found for their superior apples. Sundry items like coonskin fur gloves, floor mops, horn combs, and the making of men's shirts were occupations in most of the societies. While much of the sisters' time was occupied with domestic tasks, they found time to assist in picking over the herbs, making seed bags and other useful articles. Wines, sauces, and jellies were made for sale. Cucumber pickles and tomato ketchup were flourishing industries around 1811. Dairy products such as fine cheeses and butter were sold in quantity. Other related industries were the making of sausages, the raising of strawberries, currants, and gooseberries, even to barrels of dried elderberries. Our gift shops sold quantities of sugared flag root, sugared butternuts, which were native grown, also sugared lemon, orange, and grapefruit peel. Tons of dried apples were sold or made into applesauce. Kilns were constructed for the paying industry of drying both corn and apples. The famous Shaker applesauce was cooked in sweet cider, the proportion being something like 4 gallons boiled down to 1, then slowly cooking the dried apples in this. The result, a rich, delicious sauce. The famous Shaker cloak, named the Dorothy Shaker cape, was made from the finest imported French broadcloth. The originator of this cape was Eldris Dorothy Durgin of Canterbury. These may still be purchased from tiny white ones for babies, through little girls' sizes to ladies' sizes. Although the fine material of earlier days cannot be found, they still are a charming acquisition to my lady's wardrobe. Here in Canterbury, we had an orchard of over 1,000 maples, situated about a mile northeast of the village. Maple products such as syrup, maple sugar cakes, pulled candy, and clay sugar formed a thriving industry for many years. A variety of many types of baskets were made. Elder Daniel Bowler and Daniel Crossman of Mount Lebanon invented machinery for splint making and basket working. This craft was learned in early days from traveling groups of Indians. Between 1809 to 1871, an unending variety of several patterns were made. Immense baskets for herbs, knitting, egg and fruit baskets, or utility baskets difficult to classify were woven. The poplar baskets or boxes were among the most unique made in several of the societies from the middle 1800s to the present. The poplar tree is native to our woods. They were cut when frozen into 24-inch lengths, put through a shaker-invented plane, taking off thin strips of poplar, then shredded into fine strips, first by hand. Later, Brother Irving Greenwood devised an electric-powered machine to shred the poplar. It was woven on hand looms. A paper pasted on the reverse side made it firmer and less susceptible to breakage. Lined with various colored satins, they presented neat utility or sewing boxes. No product of the Shaker woodworking shops possesses greater charm than the multi-sized oval boxes made in nests of from 5 to 12. The boxes were joined with a method called fingers, a novel refinement over the old style of joining. Brother Delmer Wilson, still active at our main society, made oval carriers by the thousand. These, lined with satin, fitted with emery, cushion, and wax, made attractive sewing boxes. Women who joined the societies were often experienced in the varied domestic arts practiced in colonial homes, so it was natural they continued to spin yarn, weave and dye cloth, dip candles, and engage in the countless occupations of that period. Looms were used and constructed at the very outset. Carding, spinning, and the weaving of woolen, cotton, and cotton wool cloth was done exclusively by the sisters, who also hatcheled the flax for linen cloth. The first bird's eye linen was a Shaker product. Until 1809, when a machine was invented, the cloth was cut with shears made by Shaker blacksmiths. The looms were in constant use until 1853, when the comparative cheapness of mill cloth made it seem uneconomical for the Shakers to rely on their own produce. However, weaving of handkerchiefs, toweling, carpets, and spreads continued up to 1865. In Kentucky, the Shakers grew mulberry trees so as to raise silkworms for the weaving of silk. Some of the first iridescent silk was woven in Kentucky. Also, the Sabbath Day Late Shakers made some of the first wrinkle-proof material. This was obtained by placing the cloth between layers of chemically treated paper, pressed in a Shaker-invented screw press, using heat underneath, producing a shiny surface on one side, a dull water silk on the reverse. The Shaker brothers were expert agriculturalists and mechanics, making wooden ware such as pails, tubs, measures, boxes, spinning wheels, rakes, and all the furniture to supply the houses with the necessities of living. Chairs were made in all societies for their own use. However, at Mount Lebanon, chairs of all sizes were made for sale up to the close of that society. A particularly interesting chair, called a tilting chair, was made by the addition of a novel invention called a boot, which fitted on the bottom of the back legs like a ball and socket joint. The chair revolves on the boot while the boot remains stationary. Secured with a piece of rawhide, it enabled the sitter to tilt back without tipping over or leaving marks on the floors. Saxon and merino sheep were raised to obtain the finest wool for weaving. Thoroughbred horses and cattle were raised for sale. Some of the first thoroughbred Guernseys were purchased by the Canterbury Shakers from the English Isle of Guernsey. The brothers looked upon the soil as something to be redeemed from rugged barrenness into smiling fertility and beauty, so their vast acreage yielded abundantly as proof of their devotion. Among the inventions was a screw propeller, a rotary or disc harrow, automatic spring, the sash balance, and threshing machine. The Shakers were among the first to use water power to run their various mills. This led to the invention of a governor of the overshot water wheel, also a turbine water wheel. Many inventions influence our homes today, such as the machinery for making the tongue and groove boards, and the first flat broom invented by Theodore Bates of Watervliet. Broom corn was raised and brooms and brushes manufactured as early as 1798. Table swifts for winding yarn was a helpful contribution of the Hancock Shakers. Other inventions included a machine for filling seed bags and one for filling herb packages, the apple paring machine, the common clothespin, the self-acting cheese press. And did you know the first one-horse wagon used in this country was a Shaker product of Enfield, Connecticut? The Shakers, not believing in patents or monopolies of any type, were, however, forced because of lawsuits from unscrupulous money grabbers to patent a few items, such as the revolving oven, which may still be seen in the Canterbury Bakery, and the far-famed wash mill, which won a gold medal at the Philadelphia Exposition in 1876. The list of inventions and devices of Shaker ingenuity, if extended into detail, would seem almost endless. Briefly, I would like to tell you of some important inventions showing their relation to our lives today. Brother Thomas Corbett of Canterbury built a static electric machine in 1810. It consisted of a glass cylinder revolving against a chamois pad, producing frictional electricity. This charge was drawn off into a Leyden jar. It was the first therapeutic static machine. It is hard to imagine a shop today without a circular saw. Sister Sarah Babbitt of Harvard, while watching some of the brothers saw, remarked on the amount of lost motion. The idea of a circular saw came to her. She experimented with a notched disc of tin, slipped it onto her spinning wheel, and finding it adequate to saw a shingle, reported her findings. The first one-piece circular saw may now be seen in the New York State Collection of Shaker items, Albany, New York. The Shaker's prowess in research was well recognized by a gentleman who, while visiting his children at Mount Lebanon, heard of a vacuum pan being used by the Shakers in their medicinal herb industry. The vacuum pan was utilized by the Shakers because when medicine is boiled in a vacuum, it boils at a lower degree of temperature. Hence, many of the good qualities are not driven off in steam. He asked permission of the Shakers to experiment with the vacuum pan in an attempt to preserve milk. He made a success and a fortune when he invented evaporated milk. His name was Gale Borden. If you should ever go to the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, you will see the vacuum pan. The Shaker Museum at Old Chatham, New York, has on display Gail Borden's workbench. At its very peak, the Shaker movement numbered only about 6,000 members. At our beautiful village at Canterbury, around 400 members, which by some worldly standards of measurement would be only a drop in the gigantic ocean of humanity. But we feel that numbers do not count if the motivating principles are right, and if each individual gives all that he has and dedicates his hands to work and his heart to God, and if he strives to be his brother's keeper. And so we humbly point to the early Shaker founders who lived not for fame, but who were dedicated to the beliefs that when a person loves his God and also his fellow man, the personality of the individual is lost in the spirit of Christ. And so, even if much of Shakerism remains unknown, and the physical symbols to some seem to disappear completely, we know that darkness and night may fall, but there is always a tomorrow when the sun will rise again. For we feel through the revelation of Mother Ann and the teachings of Christ, we have followed a path that is clearly defined, leading us to an inner godliness and a perfect union, a love of God and a universal love for all mankind.